So, as many of you would know, some of you perhaps wouldn't, but many of you would know I'm a Collingwood supporter. And I know that's not quite as offensive here in Sydney as it would be if I was still in Melbourne. Some of you don't care in the slightest about which Aussie rules team I go for. But it's a little bit like going for Manly. And somebody also said to me recently, you use Collingwood examples much more often when your team's doing well. To which I would say, absolutely. So we're on the top of the table at the moment, and we play Sydney this afternoon in Melbourne. It's not very nice out there. There's hail forecast for Melbourne today, so it could be interesting. One of the other things that you, like, I guess, impressions, and there are probably a few people who might question this, but I'd like to think that I've been here, this is my 6th year here at St Declan's, that for many of you, you kind of think Chris is a pretty mild-mannered kind of guy, not too easily flustered, fairly calm and relaxed. And of course, that all goes out the window when I'm watching the game. I was home last weekend, Anzac Day. I was home on Anzac Day back in Canberra, and I was with my brother-in-law, who's also a Collingwood supporter, and we were watching the game. They've got like a little TV room that's not in the main living room. So we were in there, and my mum had come over, and my sister, and Adam, my brother-in-law, said, do you want to turn on the TV turn on the big screen TV, and we'll watch it in there. And I said, how do you reckon Kate, my sister, and Mum will go? And he said, I'll be fine. I said, no, let's just stay in this room. Kate got wind of that, and she said, I could hear you from one end of the house to the other as we came from behind to record a fantastic victory. Right? Now, this could all sound very self-indulgent. Why am I telling you about this? Let me tell you one other little example. I remember the very first time, so I grew up in Canberra. Somebody has to come from Canberra, and I'm one of those people. First time I ever went to see Collingwood live was when I'd moved to Melbourne, and I went to the MCG. And there were 80,000 plus people, and they were playing the Swans that day, actually. And I remember as the 80,000 crowd roared, most of whom were Collingwood supporters, I remember thinking, I do not want to draw any attention to myself here. That if that attention was drawn away from the field to me, if I did something, I kind of felt a bit intimidated. It was incredibly loud. It's maybe the loudest noise from a crowd of people I'd ever seen. Why am I telling you all of this? It's socially acceptable in our country to get really excited about a game of footy. While my sister might have complained at the fact that I was yelling at the television every time we kicked a goal, quite loudly, it's socially acceptable to be passionate about your football team. If we were to show the same kind of passion about faith, people would be like, let's be we're a bit nervous of that guy, right? Like that's a little bit full on. And I'm not saying that to follow Jesus, you need to be kind of fanatical. There's an unhealthy way of expressing faith. And I'm not talking about that. But the big difference, of course, between a football team and really caring about what we believe, of course, is that the football game ends. It's only a football game. My first year here in Sydney, Collingwood played West Coast in the grand final, and we lost in the last minute of the game to lose the grand final. I was watching it at a family's place. I thought they were neutral. They were Hawthorn supporters. I thought they were neutral, but when I arrived at the door, they had West Coast colours on the door. The coffee table, half obscuring the TV, had balloons in West Coast colours. So when we lost, fortunately, I think, I had to run back here to hear confessions. And it was so good because it was a really tangible moment for me to be able to say, well, I love Jesus more than I love the Collingwood Football Club. I won't tell you how often I have to remind myself of that, okay? But my point here is it's okay to be passionate about other things. There's some things that are very socially acceptable to be passionate about. But to be passionate about God is very unpopular today. And yet, when we encounter the person of Jesus, that awakes a passion. Not a fanatical thing, not a crazy, I'm not advocating kind of running down the street, tub thumping. When Collingwood won the grand final back in 1990, I was 15 and I was such a dag. I rode around on my bike with my Collingwood flag on the back of the bike because I was so proud of my team, right? I'm a tragic, I fully admit it. I'm not talking about that in regards to our faith. You don't have to wear it quite on your sleeve like that. But there's something far more important at stake than just a football match when we talk about our faith. And so we're actually in the middle of a little series talking about discipleship in the parish, what it means to follow Jesus. I'm going to ask Pippa just to flick a slide for me. This is the definition of discipleship that we've come up with in our parish. That a missionary disciple is a person whose friendship with Jesus ignites a desire to follow him completely and to share the love of God with others. Last week we talked about friendship with Jesus. This week, just that sense of a desire being ignited, a passion being ignited. When in the gospel today, we hear Philip say, Lord, show us the Father and then we'll be satisfied. I think what's happened is that Philip's been with Jesus for 3 years, and so he's got a friendship with Jesus, and a passion has been ignited, a desire has been ignited. He wants to see the Father, the one that Jesus has been talking about. He wants to see God. And Jesus says something crucially important to him. He says, look, to have seen me is to have seen the Father. In the Catholic tradition, we talk a lot about philosophical arguments, if you like, for the existence of God. And there's a place for that. But they'll only get you so far. Philosophical arguments for the existence of God will, I think, get you to a place where you can say, well, it's probable that God exists. But all you might know from those sorts of intellectual arguments is that he exists and that God's also the creator of all things. What Jesus is saying in the gospel today is that if you want to know what the character of God is, if you want to know what God's really like, if you want to know qualities beyond the fact that he's the creator, if you want to know that he is love and compassion, if you want to know that he is beauty, if you want to know that he is goodness and truth, if you want to know that he cares for those who are poor and suffering, if you want to know that he cares for those who are hurting in some way in our world, then you look to Jesus because he reveals to us what God's like. It's through Jesus' words and actions that we know what the character of God is. Far beyond the fact that he's the creator, of course he's that. But he's also compassion and beauty and goodness, and above all else, love. Above all else, love. When we become the friends of Jesus, a passion, a desire is ignited in us. Not to do crazy things like yell at a television set, but to have our hearts enlarged in love. To have our minds opened up to the things that God cares about, that the Lord is passionate about. To have seen Jesus is to have seen the Father. We can't see the invisible God. And Jesus is saying here to Philip, you're not going to get like a vision necessarily of him, but if you see Jesus, if you listen to his words, if you look at his actions in the gospel, you see what God's like. And the God that Jesus reveals is pure love, pure compassion, beauty, goodness and truth. As we celebrate the Eucharist then together this morning, let's ask, as it were, to see not the Father, as Philip did, but to see Jesus. May a passion, a desire be ignited in us to discover the God of Jesus Christ, which is, to, in other words, to say, to also discover the love, the goodness, the truth, the passion, the compassion, the beauty of God for ourselves.